You know, last week we did that American muscle car history thing, and we talked about the Chevys, Chrysler versus Chevy, and how Chevy got to the top. And we talked about Pontiacs, and we talked about Oldsmobiles, and people kept asking about Fords. Like, do something on Fords. Do something. You got to do something on Fords. And, well, you know, there's a lot to do on Fords. I want to do some stuff on Fords. But there's two problems when you do anything with Fords. The first is that they're very complicated. There's no, like, linear history to anything Ford does. So many different packages, so many different ideas, so many different types of racing, all of these things melding together. Some were very successful, some, yeah, no. And then Ford guys tend to be very sensitive. You can't say anything except over-the-top glowing praise. Later Ford guys, like Fox guys, they're cool. They're not like that. But older Ford guys, you know, not age old, but, you know, people who are into the older Fords, you can't say anything except that these cars were absolutely perfect in every way, shape, and form and dominated everything, everywhere, all the time, and they're the last word of everything. It's hard to make content when you're up against that sort of crowd. But people wanted Ford content. And then we did the thing yesterday on the cowl induction, day before yesterday, on the cowl induction and the setup we use on the Sledgehammer and how all of that works. And in the comments, and along with some other things, but not important right now. In the comments, there were people like, well, what about the Ford Teardrop scoop? That was the same thing. The Ford Teardrop scoop. Ford Teardrop scoop. Same thing. Better before. No, it's not. It's not a cowl induction scoop. But it is a very interesting scoop. And like a lot of Ford things, it's extremely misunderstood. It's extremely misunderstood. So let's look at the Teardrop scoop and explain how it works and how it came to be and why you don't ever want to use one. All right. So here we have a couple of problems. First is that I'm a Mopar guy. So literally everything in my world is Mopars. I don't have any Fords here to demonstrate. But I have a Plymouth. And the Plymouth is approximately the same shape, configuration, everything that a Teardrop scoop would come on. So let's just pretend that this is a Ford. Kat, can you like put like Ford letters? Okay. All right, so here's our substitute Ford, and well, the other problem now is that I have all kinds of Mopar odds and ends and scoops and so on and so forth, but I don't have any Ford scoops. I especially don't have a Teardrop scoop, so I duplicated one. And through the magic of stagecraft, here is our Ford Teardrop scoop. I know it's a fuller, right? But what I used here, very simple pieces. I used a drain bucket, a plastic drain bucket, and a shop jacket, okay, you know, a work jacket, and a couple of these screens. And I've pretty much duplicated, I know, right? It's perfect. I pretty much duplicated the Ford Teardrop scoop. So, here we go. The Teardrop scoop is neither a scoop or any sort of cowl setup. The Teardrop scoop is actually a bubble. And the only reason it exists is because when Ford put the 427 in the Fairlane for 1964, the Thunderbolt, the dual quad 427 motor and its air box didn't fit under the hood. And so they had to create a bubble. So we have to go, okay, let's go to a year before, 1963, because this setup actually has its roots in the 1963 lightweight Galaxies. What Ford originally did with that setup is come on front here, on the Galaxy is like this, it's a quad headlight setup, and what they did was they left a couple of panels out of the grille, and behind the grille, in the core support, the radiator support, they put two ducts that ran up to the air box. So they came from this section right here and ran up to the carburetors. Now on the Galaxy, which has a relatively tall hood, there was plenty of room for the motor, the dual quads, the air box, all of that plumbing. But now when they took that setup and they transferred it to the Thunderbolt for 64, none of it fit. So what they did was they opened up the core support here, and they took the high beams out and replaced the high beams with ducts that ran up to the air box, which would be right here. And that was it. There's your air induction. But now you have to cover all of this. So they put this bubble on there. Now, here's the thing about the bubble. It's actually an air extractor. In addition to clearance, now remember, the engine is pulling 100% of its air through the missing high beams. And also on the 64 lightweight Galaxies, they did a similar setup. On the factory 64 cars, they left the high beams in and still pulled through the grill. And then Ford sold aftermarket setups so that you could put it into any of these cars. And on the Galaxies, the 64s, those used the high beam delete package. All right, but that's all besides the point. So you've got 100% of the air coming through the ducts, and that's what's feeding the carburetors. What they did was they put this box, and instead of just making an empty lump, they use it as an air extractor. So it sits just above the boundary layer, right? So the boundary layer is like between 1 and like 4 inches off the hood of the car. It sits just off the boundary layer. The air comes over the front of the car, hits this, and creates a low pressure area right here. And that's what these vents were. And that low pressure area here is pulling whatever air is under the hood around the engine out and sending it into this area here. It doesn't function like a cowl induction. It's not close enough to the windshield to act like a cowl induction. So instead, like I said, it's using the airstream coming above it to create a low pressure area here and evacuate air from under the hood. So it really serves two purposes. It's a clearance bubble and it's an evacuation device. But it is not a scoop. And this is something for as long as I've been alive. People have been putting Ford teardrop scoops on cars and things that don't belong, that it doesn't belong on. It's a pretty scoop. It's a very cool looking scoop. There's no question about it. Not a scoop, it's a bubble. It's an extractor. It's not a scoop. Like it's the exact opposite of a scoop. A scoop is scooping the air in. An extractor is sucking the air out. So there's a difference. But people have been putting these things on applications where they don't belong for as long as I can remember. The problem with doing this now is that if you don't have a sealed air box and the carburetor is pulling air from another place, and you've got the carburetors pulling air from under this teardrop, they're pulling from a low pressure area. Because as the car is going this way, the air is getting sucked out of here, so therefore the air is getting sucked away from the carburetors. If you want to, legitimately, if you want to slow your car down a lot and create all sorts of weird tuning and jetting problems, put a teardrop scoop in it and don't include the air box and the ducts that form the rest of that package. So I'm getting all kinds of hate. But the teardrop is perfect. It's the thing. I love them. I think they're beautiful. But they only belong and should only be used in certain applications where that separate ducting is possible and the extraction of air from under the hood is what you're looking for. All right, so that's it. That's my Ford stuff, Ford history for now, and we'll do more later. Actually, I want to do something on those lightweight Galaxies. They're as insanely heavy as they were actually very cool cars. More on that later. All right, I'll see you tomorrow.